What happened after the Death Star exploded, and what the Empire did to the people who served it, who built it, who survived it, makes everything the rebellion face look like a slap on the wrist. The Empire didn't reserve the worst of its cruelty for its enemies. It reserved the worst of its cruelty for its own. Let's be quite clear here that this isn't a lore story. This is a case file when it comes to the subject of complete loyalty to a cause or a person that gets you nowhere. And by the end of this video, you will all understand why dying at the Battle of Yavin was the best thing that could have happened to anyone wearing an Imperial uniform that day. Let's start with the one man who got lucky. Grand Moff Wilhuff Tarkin. He was standing on that command bridge with absolute certainty in his chest. The Battle of Yavin unfolded with rebel snub fighters screaming through the Death Star trenches, with the Death Star's turbo lasers batteries swiveling too slowly, and Tarkin watching it all with the confidence of a man who had built his entire doctrine around the idea that overwhelming force rendered resistance meaningless. It took 14 years to construct the Death Star. 14 years of resources drained from 1,000 star systems. 14 years of Tarkin's career invested in a single position. That terror applied at sufficient scale could make rebellion impossible. The destruction of the planet Alderaan, mere hours before, had been his proof of concept. 2 billion people on Alderaan vaporized as a demonstration, not because Alderaan posed a military threat, but because Tarkin wanted the galaxy to watch a planet die and understand that resistance meant extinction. And now 30 snub fighters are trying to destroy his monument to fear. When Tarkin's subordinates suggesting evacuating command personnel to nearby star destroyers as the attack developed, Tarkin's response was, "Evacuate in our moment of triumph? I think you overestimate their chances." This wasn't a tactical assessment. It was arrogance functioning as suicide by certainty. Tarkin couldn't conceive of the Death Star failing because failure would invalidate everything he'd spent 14 years building. The doctrine of rule through terror, the conviction that resistance was meaningless, the political capital he had spent convincing Emperor Palpatine to dissolve the Imperial Senate and rule through regional governors, backed by planet-killing firepower. If the Death Star could be destroyed by a handful of fighters, then Tarkin's entire philosophy was wrong, and Tarkin would rather die than be wrong. Luke Skywalker's proton torpedo hit the thermal exhaust port. The reactor went critical, and over 1 million Imperial personnel vaporized in a single cataclysmic detonation. Gunners and pilots and technicians and stormtroopers and officers and maintenance workers and mess hall cooks and medical staff. 1 million lives ended in the microsecond between reactor criticality and molecular dispersal, and Tarkin was granted the only mercy available to Imperial servants, which was death before Emperor Palpatine's judgment could arrive. In that final microsecond, Tarkin was still Grand Moff, still confident, still convinced the Empire was invincible. He never saw the Emperor's face twist with rage with the destruction of the Death Star. He never felt mechanical fingers close around his throat via hologram because of his failure. He never woke up in a cloning tank with the memory of how he died when the Death Star exploded. That matters more than you might think, because what followed in the days and weeks and years after the Battle of Yavin reveals that Tarkin's instantaneous death was the best possible outcome for anyone associated with the Empire's greatest failure. Everyone who survived would face something far worse than a quick and clean annihilation. They would face Emperor Palpatine's creativity within his constructed torture chambers. But before we ever go any further on subjects like Palpatine's torture chamber methods, let's talk about the one man who did everything correctly out of all this. General Casio Tague. He's the officer at the conference table meeting on the first Death Star who actually understood completely of the rebel threat. While Tarkin dismissed the rebel alliance and Admiral Modi sneered at Vader's sad devotion to that ancient religion, General Tague was the voice of reason at the conference table. His warning to all of the general's staff at the conference table was explicit. Until this battle station is fully operational, we are vulnerable. The Rebel Alliance is too well equipped. They are more dangerous than you realize. Tarkin overruled his analysis. General Modi mocked him, saying, "This is the ultimate power in the universe," quote unquote. And the end result? The Death Star exploded exactly the way General Tague predicted it might. Here's the thing about General Tague. He wasn't on the Death Star when it blew up. He was aboard a separate Star Destroyer, watching from a safe distance, as Tarkin's arrogance became a debris field floating in space. By every rational metric, General Tague should have been vindicated. He'd raised concerns. He'd been ignored. He'd been proven catastrophically correct. But Emperor Palpatine did take notice of all this. In the immediate aftermath of the Battle of Yavin, while after Lord Vader gained control of his TIE fighter and headed to wherever he needed to head to, General Kazio Tague received a promotion from Palpatine with the rank of Grand General, one of the highest military ranks in the Empire. Emperor Palpatine placed him in charge of all military operations, effectively making him the replacement for the dead Grand Moff Tarkin. The man who had been right all along was rewarded with superior authority. Sounds like a happy ending, doesn't it? Well, it wasn't. General Tague was promoted, yes, but he was also handed an impossible mandate, which was fix the Empire's military after its greatest humiliation at the Battle of Yavin, rebuild its confidence, restore its fear that it placed on the galaxy, and do it all while navigating a kangaroo court within where Emperor Palpatine trusted no one, and all the while with Lord Vader looking for someone to blame for the failure at the Battle of Yavin. General Tague spent the months after the Battle of Yavin in perpetual paranoia. Every decision was second-guessed. Every failure, no matter how small, was considered potentially fatal. He watched officers around him die from minor infractions, and understood that his promotion hadn't protected him. It had painted a target on his back. After General Tague's promotion, he repeatedly clashed with Lord Vader. The Grand General tried to marginalize Vader to prove that conventional military leadership could succeed where Vader's mysticism had failed. Vader, meanwhile, was looking for an opportunity to eliminate General Tague and restore his own standing with Emperor Palpatine. How it all finally ended with General Tague was in his failure to capture Luke Skywalker. A significant failure, but hardly unique. Half the Imperial military had failed to capture Luke Skywalker. By that point, but Lord Vader saw his opening. He reported General Tague's failure to Emperor Palpatine with the appropriate theatrical disappointment. And the Emperor, always willing to dispose of useful tools once they'd served their purpose, gave Lord Vader permission to handle the situation of General Tague's failure at capturing Luke Skywalker. Unfortunately, General Tague didn't die quickly like Grand Moff Tarkin. He didn't get the mercy of instant vaporization. He died knowing that being right hadn't saved him, being promoted hadn't saved him, being the only competent voice in that conference room that day hadn't saved him. Because the Empire didn't reward correctness, it rewarded survival, but only to a certain degree, which in itself was short, thus fatally punishing a lower-ranking servant's successfulness at surviving anyway.